B. Collins.
Peter B. Collins, news and comment. It's Thursday, February 16th, 2017. We start with a programming note. Your humble host is going to take a couple of days off for the President's Day weekend and take a road trip to Southern California. Our next podcast coming your way on Tuesday. And this morning, as I arrived and prepared my news-gathering process, I was diverted to the live feed of a news conference from the White House. Wow. Now, I have to revise something that I said last year. Barack Obama gave his second-to-last news conference just before he hopped on Air Force One for his last free ride to Hawaii. And I suggested that that might be the last news conference held by a president, because Trump had avoided the press and any kind of organized press conference for months. Well, I fully retract that, because Trump was enjoying himself so much. He couldn't even bring himself to stop it. Twice he said, okay, last question, and he kept going for 5 or 10 minutes longer. And he revels in being able to control the exchange. He does it very effectively. He talks mostly about himself, which we're getting used to. But he loves to tweak the media at every opportunity, and he did so today. And the Conman was in really full force. He opened with a kind of moderately prepared statement that he ad-libbed from occasionally, touting his accomplishments in his first 4 weeks in office, which are few and far between, but he creates his alt-reality, and then he proceeds to sell it to you. And so Mr. Art of the Deal was there wheeling and dealing and talking about everything in terms of a deal. He was dodging questions about his campaign aide's contact with Russia, as reported in the anonymous leaks that were published by the New York Times earlier this week that helped grease the exit skids for Mike Flynn as National Security Advisor. And Trump did acknowledge that he thought Flynn was just doing his job when he talked to the Russian ambassador, but that because he didn't fully brief the vice president and then had a memory incident where he said he can't remember if he did talk about lifting the sanctions with the ambassador or not. Now, I do take Trump's point that he is the victim of a massive scheme of intentional official intelligence leaks. Now, in his tirade today, and by the way, he described his own performance at the press conference and said that he didn't rant and rave, which is what the media will say. And I'll allow for that. He wasn't really ranting. He was just rambling, often incoherently, interrupting himself, introducing irrelevant concepts to a thread that he was pursuing. And so Trump talked about the hatred that he sees in the coverage of him and his administration. He clearly watches way too much TV. And the reporters caught him in a couple of lies. One was when he, as he is compulsively known to do, had to talk about his big victory in November and the greatest electoral college win since Reagan. And that's simply not true. And when a reporter actually confronted him and told him that, he said, well, that's the information I was given. And he repeatedly called the claims about contacts between his campaign and Russia fake news. He said the leaks are real, but the news is fake. And that's sometimes hard to separate. He also claimed, without any any sense of dissembling, this administration is running like a fine-tuned machine. Oh, yeah, right. And when asked about Russia, he repeatedly turns the issue to Hillary Clinton, saying, well, that Hillary gave away 20% of our uranium. She went there with that cheesy reset button. And also later he said, does anybody believe that Hillary would have been tougher on Russia than me? And that is a question that's never been asked. Nobody is comparing him to Hillary. She's done. She's not in the picture anymore, except in his mind, because he can't let go. So, on the Mike Flynn case, he repeatedly danced around direct questions. And finally, in the end, he said that he didn't contact anybody in Russia. And he keeps saying, I don't have any deals there, don't own any property, I don't have anybody to talk to anyway. Why would I call Russia? And at one point he said that to his knowledge, nobody on his team contacted Russia, the Russians, the Russian government, the unnamed Russian intelligence officials suggested by the New York Times in its leak-based coverage this week. He also feels sorry for himself. He said that he inherited a mess. He doesn't really say exactly what the mess is, and he doesn't specifically blame Obama for it. But if any recent president inherited a mess, it was Obama. And in my opinion, Obama was not really clear enough with the American people about just how much of a mess Bush left him. And he didn't properly blame his predecessors for many of the problems. And so when he was asked about his first 4 weeks in office, to be honest, I inherited a mess. At home and abroad, a mess. Jobs are pouring out of the country. See what's going on with all the companies leaving the country, going to Mexico and other places? He said overseas he found disaster. We're going to take care of all of it, he reassured us, as the big father figure we all seek. I just want you to know I inherited a mess. So the other thing that he did was name a new nominee to serve as labor secretary. And this guy, whose name is Alex Acosta, he actually has some achievements. And while he is a Republican who clerked for Samuel Alito on the Supreme Court and served as a Republican member of the National Labor Relations Board, where they kill every union-friendly proposal that comes before them, he also has a background as a U.S. attorney in South Florida. And so he does not really fit the pattern of the wrecking crew members, people whose intention is to dishonor and disassemble the work of the agency that they are named to run. So I made a few notes while Trump was rambling in his early remarks as he was selling us the con job on how great his first month in office has been. He said that he's, really determined to keep us safe because that's why people elected him. He said that the new executive order or royal decree about immigration and travel will be released next week, and that they have tuned it up to fit the objections of the courts that he mischaracterizes, because his problem is with the trial judge in Seattle, James Robart, but Trump prefers to attack the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which simply affirmed the restraining order or the stay that was issued by Judge Robart. And Trump either doesn't understand how the legal system works or just prefers to attack the soft target of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which does have a legacy as being a liberal court, but presidents, including Bush and to some extent Obama, have moderated the leftiness of the Ninth Circuit, and it really no longer reflects the claims that it's this uber-liberal court. He also whined about how Democrats have delayed the confirmation of his nominees, not noting the real negatives that these people bring. Some of the rich guys haven't been able to clear the ethics panels and file all the right documents. Puzder, nominated for labor, was just a train wreck in every respect. And so Trump is oblivious to why Democrats would be examining his nominees. And he also blamed the media for the problems with General Flynn. And this is pretty bizarre because, of course, the media didn't hire Flynn. The media didn't fire Flynn. But Trump makes it seem like his hand was forced by these, angry publishers and reporters who just unfairly hounded Mike Flynn, who was, said Trump, just doing his job. And he talked about how the people named by the New York Times, the 4 individuals, including Paul Manafort, claim that, they've been on TV in the last couple of days, and the Donald has seen them, that they never called Russia. And when he talks about this stuff, it's so confusing because he doesn't use their names. He did single out Manafort and used his name, but you really have a hard time following what he really means. He lumped the Wall Street Journal together with the failing New York Times, he loves to say that, for their disgraceful story, he said, claiming that top briefers at the CIA are refusing to share all of the intelligence with Trump because they don't trust him, and they're not sure what he'll do with it. He said that is simply fake news. The leaks are real, but the news is fake. He said, I don't mind bad stories when they're true. Yeah, right, Mr. Thin Skin. And then he went off into a rant about how Hillary Clinton got the debate questions and that she should have confessed to that during the actual debates. So it was a bizarre exchange, and the media in general, the reporters, were played by Trump. He calls on them, he tells them to shut up, sit down. He does let some of them interrupt him, but he controls the frame and the agenda at these news conferences, and the reporters really show their weaknesses when they try to engage with him. Democratic leaders, including Nancy Pelosi, are demanding a briefing from the intelligence community and the release of the transcripts of the intercepted Mike Flynn phone call with the Russian ambassador. And I would like to see that. I think it would help a lot if we even had a single shred of evidence about these claims that have been made in the media and are treated as fact. And the release of any evidence, including those transcripts, would be quite welcome by me and I'm sure many other people. The demand from the Democrats, this briefing should include information about former assistants of the president Mike Flynn's contacts with Russian officials and also provide unredacted transcripts of any intercepted communications he had with Russian officials. And they are also continuing their demand that Jeff Sessions, the new attorney general, recuse himself, and he, of course, is resisting. Just after the news conference was completed, I recorded an in-depth interview with Robert Perry. He's a journalist I have great respect for. I don't always agree with everything Bob thinks or writes, but he has been spot on at Consortium News over the last 6 months, challenging this reporting, the consensus, the leaks by the intelligence community, and remaining skeptical in the face of this lack of evidence. And in this excerpt, you hear Bob Perry talk about the lack of evidence, the lack of facts, and that this is being used to heighten tensions with Russia, a nuclear power, and that this is no joke. Here's Bob Perry.
Well, sure, and it's extremely dangerous, and it should be understood to be that dangerous. The Russians are not kidding. As we sort of push closer and closer to their borders with more and more weapons, they're not taking this lightly. And I know the United States gets very worked up when a Russian plane flies close to an American ship that's close to part of their territory, and we see it only from the American side. But one should look at this from both sides and understand that the Russians have real concerns here as well, and therefore we should also especially be careful about the facts. We're not dealing here with something that's funny or a joke. I know Putin was photographed without a shirt on, so all we see was, I know, it's very funny. But we're talking here about pushing two nuclear powers into a possible confrontation and conflict, and we're acting like it's a joke. And the minimum thing we should do as journalists is say, okay, what are the facts? If some people at in Obama's intelligence community who had been hiding a lot of information, by the way, that they should have been releasing, suddenly comes popping out at the end of last year with all these claims, and all we asked for were show us some facts. And what they released, the 2 reports they released, were jokes. They didn't have any facts. It was essentially just trust us.
Mm-hmm.
And there was no reason why they couldn't provide at least some of the evidence. They didn't provide any of the evidence.
I'm releasing the full interview with Robert Parry of Consortium News today to my subscribers at peterbcollins.com, iTunes, TuneIn, Stitcher, Spreaker, all of the outlets that carry this podcast. And I hope you'll listen because Bob has a lot to say. We talk about how Consortium News got placed on that weird list from an obscure, anonymous organization that claimed that it was part of media in this country that was parroting or feeding Americans the Russian propaganda. And there's quite a bit else that we discussed, and I have a great deal of respect for Parry. The one thing I don't quite agree with him on is he laughs off the issues related to Mike Flynn's phone calls and whether there is anything substantively wrong there. And you can hear that in the full interview. It's all made possible by people who take out subscriptions to the Peter B. Collins podcast, like David Rabin. And when are you going to get out of med school, Dave? Thank you for renewing your annual subscription. Aidan McAleer's a monthly subscriber like Andy Krieger, and I just discovered that over there in Switzerland, Olivier de Merlot has 2 annual subscriptions. I wasn't quite aware of that, Olivier. Thank you for your generosity, and you set an example for others to follow. If you've never subscribed to this podcast, it's not too late. You can do it today. Come on over to peterbcollins.com, click menu, pull it down, click Become a Subscriber. Takes you to the sign-up page. You get options, $5, $10, $20 a month, a $50 annual subscription. We've even got a 24-hour pass for $1 if you just got to hear that new Bob Parry interview right away. So you have options. I hope you'll exercise them and help me continue my work here at peterbcollins.com. Oh, and by the way, there'll be no Facebook Live video feed this week because I'll be gone tomorrow. We'll resume that next Friday, a week from Friday. So at the news conference this morning, Trump praised Rex Tillerson, who stepped down as the chief executive of ExxonMobil to run the State Department. And the Secretary of State is described by The Guardian newspaper from London as being intentionally kept out of the White House loop, likely by people like Steve Bannon and Steve Miller, the guys who appear to have the president's ear. And The Guardian writes, it's been hard to disguise the gap between the department headquarters at Washington's Foggy Bottom and the White House, where far-reaching policy decisions are being made. Senior State Department officials who'd normally be called to the White House for their views on key policy issues are not being asked their opinion. And they have resorted to asking foreign diplomats, who now have better access to Trump's immediate circle of advisors, what new decisions are imminent. That's embarrassing. And, of course, the public voice of the State Department has been silenced. Like many other cabinet agencies, there has not been a daily press briefing since January out of the State Department. And, according to The Guardian, neither Tillerson nor his staff were consulted on the executive order imposing the travel ban on refugees and nationals of 7 mostly Muslim countries. And that led to the dissent memo signed by about 1,000 State Department employees. And when Trump decided over dinner to approve the Special Forces counter-terrorist raid in Yemen, there was no one from the State Department present or consulted. And Tillerson, who was told he'd have a free hand in hiring at the State Department, was taken by surprise when Trump rejected Elliott Abrams as the Deputy Secretary of State. Now, Trump did the right thing for the wrong reasons, as usual. It's not because Elliott Abrams is a war criminal who had to be pardoned by Poppy Bush. It's not because Elliott Abrams has given bad advice and is a neocon of the lowest order. No, it's because Trump is sensitive and thin-skinned, and Elliott Abrams is one of the people who had criticized him back during the campaign. So Trump has apparently decided to tap one of his billionaire buddies, Steven Feinberg, a co-founder of Cerberus Capital, to run a special review of America's intelligence agencies. Now, as you know, I'm sharply critical of the intel community. I support the idea of a true review. But having a crony of the president who's tight with Steve Bannon and with Jared Kushner is not going to either produce a credible report or enable people in the intelligence community to tell this review panel what's wrong. Now, there are many principled people who work at the CIA and the NSA, and many of them are silenced, gagged by their own leadership. And if there is an honest review that is truly aimed at reforming and improving the intelligence communities, I would support it. But tapping this billionaire buddy of Trump and his cronies is not a solution for anyone. And the more disturbing report is a rumor that Feinberg is under consideration to run the CIA's clandestine service. Now, after the way the president has been treated by the intel deep state, I can understand he'd like to put somebody in there who would prevent the kind of leaks that he's been facing from occurring in the future. But I don't think putting a guy like Feinberg in there, again, would serve anyone's interest. And Feinberg's rising profile reportedly is troubling Dan Coats. Now, Coats is a former Indiana senator, served on the Senate Intel Committee, has been named Director of National Intelligence. He's not yet confirmed. It's now deferred until the end of the president's holiday break, the recess, so February 27th is the earliest that the Senate could meet to confirm Dan Coats. And the New York Times says that he is especially angry at what he sees as a move by Bannon and Kushner to sideline him before he is even confirmed. And there are talks that they want to eliminate the office of the Director of National Intelligence, which begs the question, well, why are you trying to confirm Dan Coats there in the first place? Also, it's important to note in the end of these news stories the details that you find out about Feinberg. Now, the company he co-founded, Cerberus, participated in the takeover of Chrysler, and they got out of that deal. They made some money on it. They also have recently taken over the Safeway grocery store chain, one of the places where I shop here in California. And Cerberus owns DynCorp or DynCorp, I've never known how to pronounce that, which is one of those government contractors at the trough of the State Department, the Pentagon, and other agencies. DynCorp is now locked in a major legal dispute over the fate of a $10 billion State Department contract that it previously held. Oh, and John Kelly, former general, new Homeland Security Director, he just recently resigned from the Cerberus board where he was pulling down $166,000 a year for, what, quarterly board meetings? That's a sweet little payoff, isn't it? David Friedman, the bankruptcy lawyer who is cozy with Trump because he handled Trump's bankruptcies over the years. He's got no diplomatic experience, and he is a hardline Zionist and a direct supporter of illegal Israeli settlements in the West Bank. Well, he's working on his skills in apologizing, because at his confirmation hearing today, he had to walk back highly charged comments that he had made during the presidential campaign. He said he broadly regrets his language, promising to be respectful and measured if he becomes a diplomat, and the inflammatory rhetoric that accompanied the presidential campaign is entirely over. Well, he slimed other Jews, including the liberal Zionists at J Street, saying that they were far worse than capos, who were the Jews who cooperated with the Nazis. He is likely to be confirmed, unfortunately. Another victim of Trump's thin skin and vanity is a guy named Michael Singleton. He was a top assistant to Ben Carson at the Department of Housing and Urban Development until, well, just the other day. It was yesterday when people who were reviewing his file, he was on the job, but he hadn't been completely vetted. I guess he hadn't been extremely vetted yet. They discovered that anything you and I could have discovered with an easy Google search, that this guy, Michael Singleton, had written a couple of pieces sharply critical of Donald Trump. Here's a quote from a piece that was published way back in October of 2016. My party in particular has allowed itself to be taken over by someone who claims to be a Republican, but doesn't represent any of our values, principles, or traditions. Singleton, though, has a safety net. He's going back to work for his buddy Armstrong Williams, the Republican Uncle Tom, who surfaced during the Bush administration as well. Today is an unofficial strike day by immigrants across the United States. They're calling it a day without immigrants, and carpenters, plumbers, cooks, cleaners, grocery store owners have decided that they're not working today. Restaurants in Washington are particularly affected. At the Pentagon, the commissary there is short of workers at Sparrow's, Starbucks, and Taco Bell. In New York, parts of the construction industry were shut down. And I applaud this. And I've linked in the show file for today's podcast to the 2004 documentary, or its trailer anyway, called A Day Without a Mexican. And I recall when that was released, and I interviewed one of the producers. It's a very powerful film that helps educate people about the true role of non-citizen residents of these United States. And one of them got a dose of the ugly ICE now operating under Trump's orders. An undocumented woman alleging to be the victim of domestic violence was arrested last week in Texas, El Paso, by federal immigration agents just moments after she obtained a protective order against her alleged abuser, who may have tipped off the ICE agents. Documents filed late last week said that the woman was in the El Paso County Courthouse February 9th. She obtained a protective order against her boyfriend, whose name is Mario Alberto de Avila. And the woman who's complaining here is a transgender person, and she had just been granted the order for a domestic violence claim. And as she exited the courthouse, ICE officers picked her up and deported her. Now, she had been previously deported 6 times, and when that happens, you carry a felony violation for having been deported and then returned. And so I don't know much else about this transgender person. But it doesn't appear that she was accused of any serious crime that would amount to a felony beyond immigration issues. And this is the kind of ugly scene that we're going to see play out on an almost daily basis. Now, I want to be fair. Obama deported millions of undocumented persons, and Trump will have to do a lot to catch up with that sordid record. Over at Shadowproof, there's a great piece today by Brian Sonnenstein, who covers prison issues, noting that 2 attorneys have sued the private prison company CoreCivic, formerly Corrections Corporation of America, because they record communications between lawyers and clients who are being held in various jails and lockups and prisons. Now, lawyers and their clients have a right to private communications. And when they're not possible, the people like a phone company or the prison operator, they have a duty to respect the Sixth Amendment rights of individuals. And this is a suit that has been brought before. And the former Corrections Corporation of America has been found in violation. So this is a very serious problem that happens in prisons all across the country. But in this case, CoreCivic was setting up servers that automatically recorded all the calls, segregated the attorney-client calls, and made them easily available to federal prosecutors. That is egregious. I am sorry to report that workers at Boeing's South Carolina plant, North Charleston, overwhelmingly rejected, in a vote, an offer to be represented by the International Association of Machinists. It was a 74% vote to reject. We've hit a real low point in union organizing and representation in this country, and I'm really sorry to see it. Gross violence claimed by the Islamic State today. First in Pakistan, where IS claimed responsibility for a bomb blast that killed at least 70 people, injured about 150 at a crowded shrine in southern Pakistan today. And also today in Baghdad, a car bomb ripped through a used car market, killing at least 52 people. And the wars go on, and the carnage continues. I mentioned at the outset that I'm heading to Southern California. We're going to visit friends over the weekend, and we might go to see the taping, or it's actually a live broadcast, of Bill Maher's Friday night HBO show, Real Time. I've done it once before, and it's interesting to see how the show works and watch it in person. But I'm having second thoughts because Jeremy Scahill was scheduled to be a panelist on the show, and he pulled out yesterday and posted a Twitter comment that he refuses to be on the same show with the Breitbart editor Milo Yiannopoulos. And he offered praise of Bill Maher and his producer, says, I don't always agree with Bill, but he allows free speech and allows people to push back on him on his own TV show. But Scahill wrote that Yiannopoulos has ample venues to spew his hateful diatribes. Appearing on Real Time will provide Yiannopoulos with a large, important platform to openly advocate his racist, anti-immigrant campaign. Well, in a kind of nasty way, Bill Maher pushed back himself. And he aligns Jeremy Scahill, who is a very bright, independent journalist, no apologist for the Democratic Party or for liberals, and yet that's who Bill Maher lumped Scahill in with. He said, liberals will continue to lose elections as long as they follow the example of people like Scahill, whose views veer into fantasy and away from bedrock liberal principles, like equality of women, respect for minorities, separation of religion and state, and free speech. If Yiannopoulos is indeed the monster Scahill claims, and he might be, nothing could serve the liberal cause better than having him exposed on Friday night. But the way Bill sets up his show, Yiannopoulos appears in the opening interview segment that's after his comedy monologue, and the panelists never get an opportunity to criticize or agree with that opening interview guest. And so it's just up to Bill Maher to counter what Yiannopoulos has to say, and, well, Maher is in agreement with Yiannopoulos on the dangers of Muslims and the danger of Islam more generally. And I pointed out the hypocrisy that Maher has displayed recently as he brings on Sam Kean to embrace the marginalization of Muslim people and then makes jokes about Trump's travel ban. And Maher responded to the direct comment from Scahill saying, my comments on Islam have never veered into vitriol. And I don't think that is true either. Finally, today, an email came in from a New York City listener, Kathleen. She said, Peter, tonight I participated in a protest at Grand Central Terminal to protest Trump and Netanyahu and their horrible policies and philosophies. I noticed as we headed out to walk toward Trump Tower on Fifth Avenue, the military stood next to the police, potentially acting as surrogate police. Isn't this a violation of posse comitatus? I tried to take a picture, but they disassembled by the time I got my smartphone out, and they were there for quite a few minutes next to the police. Why, she asks. Your comments would be appreciated, or am I getting paranoid? Well, Kathleen, I don't think you're being paranoid. Now, I went to Wiki Leak. I'm not going to edit this out. I went to Wikipedia and looked it up. Posse comitatus was passed in 1878, and the purpose is to limit the powers of the federal government in using federal military personnel to enforce domestic policies inside the U.S. borders, or as we now say, in the homeland. The act only specifically applies to the U.S. Army and, as amended in 1956, the U.S. Air Force. And there were some modifications made under Bush in 2006. They passed an amendment called Use of the Armed Forces in Major Public Emergencies. Quote, the President may employ the armed forces to restore public order and enforce the laws of the United States when, as a result of a natural disaster, epidemic, or other serious public health emergency, terrorist attack, or incident, or other condition, the President determines that domestic violence has occurred to such an extent that the constitutional authorities of the state, blah, blah, blah. So then in 2008, while Bush was still president, The changes were repealed in their entirety, reverting to the previous wording of the Insurrection Act. So that's where it stands today. And I believe that it is unconstitutional to deploy the military on the streets of the United States without an order which addresses the issues of posse comitatus. Thanks for joining me today for my News and Comment podcast. It's available on YouTube. And I remain Peter B. Collins.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails to you. Keep smiling